But I think it's pretty common with any of these highly successful, not just athletes, but business people as well, entrepreneurs. There's always something that happened in their childhood or as they were growing up that completely shifted their path. And in a lot of cases, it actually turns out to be worse. So something will happen and, they end up in drugs, they become alcoholics. But the other side is they use that pain as motivation to get whatever it is they want in life. So it's a great story.
Yeah, no, it does work both ways. So yeah, it's not a perfect path to success, that's for sure. And you don't look. I mean, I don't think we envy anybody that has trauma. As a 6, 7, or 8-year-old. Yeah, that's tough.
It is. But is there like a moment in your career as a coach where you realized it's not just about soccer? Because what you're telling me right now is it's talent, but then you're looking at how they're treating their parents. I would have not assumed that that's a coach's job, but the way you're putting it, it's as important as how they are on the field, right?
Well, the nonverbal is, and that's body language, often referred to as part of the nonverbal, and you can tell. In any line of work, in any line of day-to-day life, body language tells all.
Yep.
You don't need any words. So that kind of thing. How do they? I want to know how they're treating the referee. Mm-hmm. Are they treating the referee with respect, or is it? I would often watch if I'm watching games. I made sure I stayed till the end of halftime, or at least when halftime was commencing, because I wanted to see how a player down 2-0, how they walked off the field. I wanted to see if they started complaining about the sun or the referees or the coach, whatever. Were there little cliques talking on their own? I just wanted to see how they operated. So that's just another example of what you're saying. The seminal moment, I don't know, but I will tell you, when I first started coaching, all I cared about was winning. How am I going to? I just looked at the soccer only. I didn't think about anybody's life, and I'm working with teenagers, and I didn't think about it. And I'm going to tell you the moment it hit me that I've got to be a better communicator, and it was while I was coaching at Ridge High School. That was my first full-time coaching job. It wasn't full-time, but it was my first serious coaching job. I started that program. It's where I went to high school, so I knew a lot of the teachers. And it was only a few years out of college, and I was there for 10 years. And I would say 2 or 3 years into it, maybe even longer, I can't remember, and there was this young lady, and I was very close with her parents. Just a wonderful family. They had moved in from the Southeast, and she was a good player. But something happened along the way, and I don't know, but something happened along the way to her personally, and it might have been who she was hanging out with outside of the team, but she became kind of a different person. Mm-hmm. Now, because of our relationship and because of the level of player she was, there was an assumption, probably amongst the whole team, that I was going to name her captain. What I did as sort of a tradition, and I don't remember exactly when I started it, is that I would have a banquet at the end of every high school season, and at the banquet I would name the captains for next year. Mm-hmm. So the banquet ended, this young lady's in the crowd with her parents, and I named the captains, and she wasn't named. Mm-hmm. And she got up and kind of ran out of the room, had a confrontation is the wrong word to describe it, but her father wanted to talk to me. Yeah. And he said, let's not talk here. Let's have a phone conversation or meet sometime, but I don't understand what just happened. Yeah. And then I did speak to him later, and I explained to him what happened, but I said, I've learned a massive lesson here, is that I can't just blindside somebody. Before that, no, it was after that. Another time I learned. So I didn't always, get the message. And I think this was at Rutgers even. But I used to put the starting lineup on the board. So when the players came in for the meeting, the lineup was there. And then we'd go over pregame. There. So one of the players who maybe had started 5 or 6 consecutive games, she walked in and her name was not on the board. Mm-hmm. I lost her for the game.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, and now what I did from that point on is if somebody expected to be in that 11 for whatever the reason, I need to explain it to them before I put it on the board and announce it to the team.
Mm-hmm.
So they might be upset, they might be ticked off, they might be cursing me and, hoping for my demise, on their whatever. But I've told them and I've prepared them, and any athlete or any person in any lifetime activity, if there's bad news, tell me first before, don't surprise me with it, So the real seminal moment was the captain thing. But you think I would have learned my lesson and have communicated that, or my assistant. Where were my assistants to tell me this? No, I'm just kidding. But no, this is those are the things, and some people might say, hey, you don't need to explain that. I mean, that would be the old school approach. It's just you come in and you take it.
Yeah.
Your name's on the list or your name's not on the list. What can I tell you?
Yep.
I don't need to explain this, but I don't really think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the environment as well. I mean, if it's an overly competitive environment, depends on your relationship with the team members. But everything you've mentioned so far has been in and around communication, right? And communication in any context, not just sports, but for this specific conversation, communication on the field, when you're winning or when you're losing, is very different. When the team's losing, the communication goes downhill really quickly because there's anger now, there's emotion. When the team's winning, there is also emotion, but it's a positive emotion. So it could be an increase in effective communication. But what are the fundamentals of communication that you've learned from soccer that the everyday person can apply to their lives?
Well, for soccer, I don't know if this will be a life application, but I'll tell you it anyway. It's very important so you have these training sessions during the week leading into a game.
Yep.
And the reason you train is to prepare you for the competition, so that hopefully some of the things that occur during training will now show themselves during the competition. So the thing, again, learning along the way, is at first my thinking is you have to alter and provide a variety of ways to do the same thing, or you're going to lose the player's interest.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I learned is if you do that too much, you actually don't get a result of the tactic or the technique that you're trying to. So if I do I want to show how to, work a combination close to goal and have 10 different ways to have an exercise leading into it, or do I want to do the same exercise every day and have the players gradually get better?
Yep.
Seminal moment. I'm recruiting in Finland, and I'm watching the Finland national team. It's an indoor training session. It was in the winter. It was just really cold, and they did a pattern to goal. It was a little combination in the midfield. Got the ball wide to the right. Service. Finish. For 45 minutes, they did the exact same pattern. Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing they alternated. So they would have it on the left side with the left-footed player serving, and they'd have it on. And I'm talking about the same players are involved with it.
Yeah.
They'd rotate a different player in, probably a reserve. I couldn't really tell, just to give the right leg a little bit of a rest from all the service. And I was thinking to myself, and I was sitting with another coach at the time, and I remember telling him, I said, "Boy, if I did this with my team, they would fade away, and it would become too repetitious, and they would start losing focus, and it would be so I'd have to move on to something else." Yeah. To counter that, I'm watching this, and they're getting better along the way. And by the end, it's boom, boom, wide, boom, Had to go back of the net every time.
Yeah.
Perfect service, front post. So I really took that, and here's communication again. If you communicate it to your team and tell them the story. Tell them the story, what you're going through when you're doing these sessions and you're trying to get a certain point across, and how this is the best way.
Yeah.
Why do it different ways? Let's just do it. Let's be repetitive. And you know what? I'll provide enough variety in some other areas so that you'll be, it's not going to be a drag. Because and I don't know how good a job I did in this, because since I've retired from coaching and have been doing these thousands of interviews for Sirius XM-FC, and it's mostly coaches, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
And I've talked to multiple professional coaches coaching high-level pro players who talk about ending the training session on something that's fun, on a note, so that when that session ends, they're anticipating the next one. They want to come back to the next one. I don't know how. I didn't, I'm sure I did that at times, but I don't know if I was thinking clearly enough about that's what I want to do, so that tomorrow they're ready to come back in and go. So it's training needs to. So if there's a lesson, I don't know if that's a life lesson, but you don't have to provide, or you shouldn't have to provide variety if the final product is going to be better.
Yep,
Repetition versus having to go into all these different ways to do it. But I will say, but you still have to. You can't just do the same thing for 9 months straight. I'm not even suggesting that. I'm just saying, players sometimes get a little stuck, and I think if you prepare them, they'll understand why.
Yeah, I think it's shiny object syndrome, right? So we're all focused on just doing the next best thing or doing a bunch of things at once. But if you focus on one thing and become a master of that thing, then
sure,
it's hard for anybody to compete against you, right? So the Finland team example, they're probably using that strategy for just that game, but they're winning that game. And then they'll probably do another one for another game. Yeah. So that way, the other teams can't really they can't watch footage of that football, that match, and say, okay, this is what we should expect, this is what they're going to do on us. No, they'll do variation. Over time, there should be variation. But in short periods of time, the lesson is just be a master at one thing, right? Yeah. Don't try to be a master at everything, because it's impossible for one team to be good at all the different variations, right, or team plays, whatever the football term is. But in communication, the flip side of communication is listening. And as a leader, as a coach, I think that anybody in a leadership position needs to be a good listener. What have you learned over the years? Because you've dealt with teenagers, and they have their own emotions, and they have a bunch of other things going on in their lives. They're growing up, they're becoming adults. So what have you learned as far as listening is concerned over the years?
Not just listening to the players, but your assistants, the support staff, your administrators. And I think over the years, I've been a pretty good listener. I will tell you this, I've become a better listener as an interviewer, because that's what interviewing is. And we talked about before the start of this that our goal is to have a conversation. It's a conversation. You're not looking at a notepad. Here's the question. Boom, I answer. Here's the question. I answered. It's a conversation. The only way you can have a conversation, whether it's an interview setting or I just met you, at somebody's party, and you have to listen. And you've been in this situation before, I'm sure, where somebody's not listening to you because of the way they respond.
Of course.
And sometimes it's the eye contact. But somebody interviewed me recently about the interviewing process. So it's interesting. I was being interviewed about interviewing, and that just So what would you say to someone who's getting started? Listen. It's the most critical part of doing these interviews that I do, because what happens, and it takes a while, because it's a bit of a nerve-wracking profession. If you're live on the air, you have 15 minutes, you have this list of questions that you prepared, and what you learn is that 75 to 80% of everything you prepare for, whether it's an interview or whether it's the commentary I do for New York City FC, cutting room floor, you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. Unless the exception is if you have one or two questions in there you feel like have to be asked, then make sure you get to them.
Yeah.
So if you have a little non sequitur in there, because you want to get that question in, then you do that. But you learn, and it's you have to be comfortable to interview. So I would say I've been doing interviews consistently for 11 years now, and first 4 or 5 years, I'm so much better now than I was then, because it's one of those things that, and I think there are very few among us that are very, very good at it.
Yeah.
And it's because it's a kind of an art form. So it's all about listening. And I, as with anything else, I suppose, I wish I could go back, because I'd be a better listener to my players, to my assistants, to the support staff, to the administrators. I'd be a better listener. But I think I was a pretty good one back then.
Yeah.
But listen is, if you ask me to encapsulate my entire life as a professional, that would be a word, I think, that would resonate.
Listening. Yeah, no, even as a host, you see lots of hosts trying to impose their own opinions and biases into a conversation. And
they put themselves in it, yeah.
And the thing is that why'd you call a guest on your show if you're going to just share your own thoughts, right? You might as well just kick them off and talk yourself.
No, it's... there are a lot of people who that is one of their interview techniques is making sure they've inserted themselves into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.